one of the things that I've noticed is when you stay in a stretch for a longer period of time, there are different phases, and the body sort of starts releasing more and more and more. And there is usually kind of at one point a more gliding, sliding release that happens. Then I wonder, is that the fascia that you feel kind of stretching, letting go in the stretch? Do you in Yin Yoga deal with perceiving the movement of the different tissues in the stretch, or is that just not possible?
You just stole my speech for today.
Oh.
I'm very disappointed. I thought I had a brilliant original idea.
I won't be able to be there, sorry.
No, one of the reasons why we think fascia is an exciting field, because it describes phenomena such as you just very, very clearly and cogently outlined. The experience of yoga, and again, I'll talk to Yin Yoga because that's my subject field, but in any field of yoga, any yoga practice, that experience is true. It's a little slowed down and stretched out in Yin, so you can sense it happening, but that's happening in other forms of yoga as well.
Right.
And it's not a linear, I'm pulling on these fibers like a rubber band.
Right.
That is not the experience in yoga. It's as you described. I'm there, it feels like my thigh is a rock. It's not moving, it's not moving, it's not moving, and then it moves.
Right.
You're like, what? And then that might happen, again in Yin, because you have more time, that might happen 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Well, to me it is not a satisfactory explanation to propose that something's happening in the collagen fibers of the body. The collagen fibers are relatively static. I mean, I just heard a lecture at this Congress where there's speculation that the number of collagen or the tendons in your body at the very least don't turn over in your lifetime. And I've read other studies that says, no, the collagen will turn over, be replaced every 300 to 500 days. So whatever you take, it never changes, or it takes almost a year. The variability in our flexibility can't be explained by a collagen change, but it's explained very well by the idea of the gel component in fascia. Fascia has 3 components. That's what defines it. It has cells like any other tissue. It has fibers, and it's called the extracellular matrix, which I call the gel, after Dr. Gerald Pollack's ideas. So you have cells, you have fibers, you have gels. And it's the gel that I'm speaking to briefly in the presentation later today, which you just touched upon. If you can imagine to a muscle and a fascia sheath that's over it, and they're gliding past one another like this. Well, if the gel inside there is more thick and viscous, the slide doesn't happen very easily. There's a strong sense of nearly adhesion. Not lubrication, but adhesion.
Yeah.
But we know that that gel can change like that, from thick to loose. Temperature, pH, acidity of the body, and mechanical stress. And it makes a completely cogent explanation to go, that is what I experience. I feel some group of muscles or fascia, which I don't think any one person could discriminate and identify. But in that area, I feel this, come on, stretch. But I think even that word, stretch, is misleading.
Let
yeah, it's like let go. And what lets go eventually is there a glide happens.
Yeah.
And I believe that hesitation, that pull, is that you've got these surfaces trying to move past one another, and then it's adhesive. The gel is thick, but the mechanical stress eventually alters that gel enough that it becomes more lubricating rather than adhesive, and you get that whoosh release.
Right.
Until you stumble into the next pocket of gel, or this surface here contacting down here. Now that's the new sticking point. But when you speculate that this is what we're experiencing from day to day, when you speculate that we're just waiting for a phase change to happen, that puts a completely different image in your mind
Yeah.
than I'm pulling a fiber. And now the fiber, I pulled the fiber that much,
Right.
and now I pulled the fiber that much. And that kind of makes you go like this.
Yeah.
Do I really want to pull my fibers like that?
Right, right.
But when you have the idea that it's multi-layers of fascia, periosteum, muscle, fascia, more muscle, layered cake of fascial surfaces, lubricated with soft gel, when you have that image in your mind, that's what you're changing. That's what you're addressing.
Yeah.
It completely alters your subjective interpretation of what you're feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
And very often, the subjective interpretation of what you're feeling is almost more important than what's happening. Because if you follow on the work of John Sarno, guy who deals with chronic back pain, his success in that field is almost entirely based on re-educating people to reinterpret what you're feeling. Because if you interpret what you're feeling as a dangerous, bad thing, you get this cycle of, oh my God, that's bad, you tense up, which increases the sensation. You're in this upwelling cycle of worse,
Right,
worse,
yeah.
worse, worse, worse.
Yeah.
And his success, which is quite high
Yeah.
in dealing with chronic back pain, his success is primarily, let's take a look at your x-rays, let's take a look at your things, and let's debunk all the diagnosis that you've been given of what's going on. Your nerves are not being sawed in half. Your disc is not squirting out to the side like an egg sandwich. When you convince someone, which takes time, when you convince someone that the subconscious image you've had in your mind of what's going on is not happening,
Right, right.
all of a sudden, years of pain, they're able to relax through and it doesn't bother them as much anymore. Now that's an extreme example,
Yeah.
but all of us have subconscious, at the very least, or sometimes very sophisticated, conscious interpretations of what's good and what's bad and what we're feeling.
Right.
And if you can change that, hopefully it's not a fairy tale, you're changing it to be more accurate.
Right.
If you can change the interpretation of the sensation,
Yeah.
you're going to approach your practice very, very differently.
Yeah. And I love the word, you used the word phase transition in there, which is a great way of thinking of the stretch, that you're just kind of patiently allowing the tissue time, and the phase transition will happen from within the tissue itself, and you really just have to step out of the way and allow this change to happen, which is kind of almost like a systemic change. It's not just like stretching a rubber band. It's something happens that allows that particular wholeness to reset, in a sense.
And I think that's a perfect example. Just using the word phase change has stimulated in you,
Yeah.
oh, that's a very appealing idea, that I can't rush this process too much. There's what can I do and what can't I do.
Right.
What you can do is put stress on the tissue. What you can't do is make a chemical phase change happen at your convenience.
Yeah, yeah.
And so some days the phase change happens first few seconds.
Right.
Who knows why? I mean, you can speculate why. And other times, believe me, I've done this 36 years, there are days where it's felt like I've never done yoga before.
Yeah.
And you go like, and all you can do is not get angry or upset or anything, and you go like, wow, I really have thick gel today. You know, and then you go like, I'm just going to have to wait.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, we can have this speculation because we have a richer theory, I think a more accurate theory of what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think theories are important, even though no theory is complete, and we might have competing theories, and that's just the nature of science. I think that theories are important because whether you have a formal theory and you're very sophisticated, or you don't, you have a folkloric, subconscious, culturally inherited theory of what's going on.
Right.
So at the very least, even if you don't have an ambition to be very biochemically sophisticated, it's worth paying attention to the broad ideas of what these scientists are discovering. The idea that it's gel and that it goes through a phase change. That's enough to chew on without getting into any great detail.
Yeah. Well, last question, and I warn you, it's a big one, so you can give me your
I'm going to move back.
elevator speech answer. But you created this fascinating DVD where you showed that the shape of the joint is ultimately what affects our ability to get into yoga postures and retain sort of the ideal alignment in yoga postures. Given your research into fascia, do you feel that there is more detail to that model now that you would want to add?
Yes, what I would add is that you want to stay focused on the target area of a pose. You want to know which muscle group is that posture supposed to be stressing. And if you stay focused on the target area, we call that a functional approach to yoga. If you stay focused on where my foot should be, we call that an aesthetic approach to yoga. And what we encourage, what we would add to that DVD, it's in there, it's just not emphasized as strongly as it could be. What we would add to it is, it doesn't matter whether your skeleton has the potential to do the full splits. It doesn't matter if your skeleton has the potential to do an incredible back bend. That doesn't matter. If you are depressed because you've become convinced that I can't do that pose, therefore I can't do yoga, you're misinterpreting the message. It doesn't matter whether you can do full splits. What matters is, can you find a pose to stretch your groin? That's what full splits does. And so that's what I would, if I had to balance the presentation, it would be, yes, there are very real limits to what you can do. Maturely recognize these limits so you don't get hurt. Come out of fantasy land and come back to reality. But that's just sort of the angel of death approach. You won't do that, you won't do that, you won't do that. But it doesn't matter that you can't achieve an aesthetic idealization. It doesn't matter that you won't do the full splits. There's still plenty of ways to stretch your groin, or bend your back, or stretch your thighs. And so if I could balance that out a little bit, which you can't in a DVD, you got to choose a message and go with it. But the balance to it is, your skeletal limitations do not limit your yoga life. It just means you have to find different variations to affect the target area.
Beautiful. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Namaste.
Namaste.